What's up, my nerd friends? I got a new truck. This is the Element RC Enduro, or also known as the Trailwalker 4x4 RTR. I will be dropping in a brand new HOBBYWING WP1080, going through the setup, install, what all the settings do, how the programming box works, calibration, and talking about some of the small changes I made to this RTR to kind of butter up her a bit and nerd out. So thanks for joining. Under the hood, it's pretty much stock. I trimmed off some plastic and changed some stuff around with the running boards. We'll get into that a little bit later, but this is a look at stock setup. Sure, kind of, I don't want to say standard rock crawl setup, but ladder frame. Electronics kind of in the middle, servo up at the front, battery kind of midsection. And what I'm going to do, replace the stock speed control with a shiny new WP1080, the HOBBYWING brushed crawler, or brushed rock crawling speed control that is super awesome. First part is easy. Take out the stock speed control. Uninstall complete. I'm gonna remove these motor wires too. The motor is marked, there's a positive and a negative. I'm gonna hook it up that way and then do a little bit of testing to make sure everything goes the right way. In the end, if you ever hook up a motor, do the calibration and run it goes wrong, you should switch the motor wires on a brush setup. You don't want to use your reverse as your forward, like by switching the radio or whatever the case may be. I like to check motor wire length, trim it down probably a little bit at least, but still leaving enough room for moving around a little bit if you make motor changes or need to put this into another vehicle. You don't need it to be just exactly the right length. I tend to do both of my wires pretty much, the same length for the most part. A lot of times you can get one shorter than the other to make it look super cool. That's awesome, but not always necessary. Just using wire strippers to do the installation. I like to use wire strippers so that you don't get those little strands of wire that are all sorts of bad. When I tin my wires, I try not to tin them up because the solder runs down the wire, so you lean them sideways so that the wire doesn't soak up all the solder. Solder is a bad conductor. It's just to hold the wires in place. People often ask, how hot is your iron and what solder do you use? It's getting harder and harder to find what I call the good solder, leaded classic American solder. A lot of the products that you purchase that are sold internationally use a lead-free solder or a high silver content solder that's a little higher temperature and probably a little harder to work with for a lot of situations. So hand soldering like we're doing, little stuff. A lot of times this leaded solder is easy, and I get this stuff from my local hobby shop. It is fantastic. Rosin core 6040 lead tin solder. On brush motor setups, it's marked, but the blue is negative, the yellow is positive. These guys are gonna come from the back side, so I'm gonna try to solder them on like this, pointing upwards. A little tin on the solder tab first. It's kind of always good to tin your tabs. I'm gonna put the positive wire kind of pointing on this direction towards the speed control, and I'm gonna try to do the same with the negative wire. And the wire should be flat on the tabs, don't float them in the solder. And then when you get done, there should be a nice uniform layer of solder across the whole wire. If you see strands or anything like that, loose wires, that's all bad. Make sure you fix that. I'm gonna mount this kind of far forward, keep the weight shifted up to the front, keep these wires all nice and tidy. And for my rock crawl stuff, I usually just do a simple single layer of double side tape because it's not going very fast and it's not doing any hard flat landing jumps, so the electronics aren't susceptible to too much shock damage. But I'm gonna go fast rigs. If they're gonna be run on a track or something like that, you want 2 or 3 layers of double side tape at least to help protect the speed control from shock damage. And you definitely don't want to like hard mount your electronics. And then here's a pro tip. Always make sure everything's clean, of course, but if you heat up the double side tape, just a fuzz, makes it stick a whole lot better. Kind of speeds up the curing process, and that way they don't move around on you later. I'm gonna push this all the way up forward to like right at the edge of the rail, snug that guy down, and then these guys, I'm gonna lace under here kind of just like the stock setup did. That'll sit in here, slide into slot, and then the speed control goes into channel number 2, and the black wire goes towards the outside edge of the receiver, always. I'm gonna rock this stock servo for as long as it'll let me, because I've been pretty impressed with these generations of RTR servos, so we'll give this one a shot. Lots of folks, the first thing you did when you got an RTR was bought a servo. I always thought that was kind of funny, but last couple generations of RTRs, you guys get Metal Gear servos. In my day, that was unheard of. And last thing is to secure the switch. And I'm going to route this wire along the back inside like that to keep it kind of away. So the switch, I tend to try to get like as much coverage on the flat as I can, because if you've ever had your switch come loose while you're driving around, it's super annoying. So it comes with 2 trays, and this is the short tray, and it fits the short style race packs. Like if you guys got go fast rigs, or you know, small 3 cells and stuff like that, it comes with a tray just for that. Or if you're into the full size packs, it comes with a tray for that also. This is cool. I use these in my dragster and a couple other things, so to be able to put them in the rock crawl, have tons and tons of runtime is great. And because this rig's going to be driven by a bunch of different people, lots of runtime. This is a 5,000 milliamp Intellect 2-cell battery pack. Should be good. Turn the radio on. Lights are on. I don't know what that means. We'll plug this guy in and see what happens. What I usually do on a fresh build before I do anything else, I just turn it on and see what happens, see what's going on. There's like a little bit of operation. I touch the trigger here and you get something. So now we turn it off. We know that things lit up and nothing bad happened. So the next step we're going to do is the throttle calibration of the speed control to this radio. Trims are set at 0, throttle travel is set to max. On this one, throttle is set to R, which I'm guessing is reverse. What I want to check though is after I do the calibration, which direction the tires turn, and then adjust the motor accordingly. So calibration, there. So there's my throttle, that's the, I'm going to squeeze it for throttle, and that's reverse. So holding down the set button, turn the speed control on, it's beeping, you let go. While it's at neutral, you tap the button, give it full throttle, tap the button. Oh, nothing happened. So what does that mean? It means that the radio or the speed control is not seeing the right output. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to go back up to here, and I'm going to reverse the throttle channel. I'll just change it. If anything ever happens, the first thing to check is the throttle channel itself. So I'm going to change that to the other direction, and we'll give this another shot. So start the process over. Hold the set button down, turn it on. It's beeping. It's good. Neutral. All right. Takes 1 beep there. Full throttle. 2 beeps for full throttle. Full reverse. 3 beeps there. So the problem was, and then it finishes up, speed control was not seeing the right direction for forward and reverse. So we just had to switch that back to normal on this radio. For some radios, it's going to be normal. For some, it's going to be reverse. But if you run into a problem, that's the first thing you're going to check. And now, I got the calibration done. Throttle set. I'm going to see which direction the motor goes when I give it throttle. And it's going backwards right now. See that? The wheels. Well, I don't know that you can see super good there, but anyway, trust me, it's going backwards when I give it throttle. So instead of switching the radio and using the reverse and the speed control the whole time, I'm going to actually unsolder these motor wires and switch those to make the motor go the right way. So WP1080 and the programming card, the LED programming card, there's 2 plugs on the top. You use the one on the right, the one that's got the funny little squiggly thing on it, that goes for the white wire, and then the other end of this plugs in to the speed control right on top, fan port, programming port, whatever you want to call it. Turn the speed control on, the lights come on and off for a second, and then you get the numbers. Item is the numbers along the row, and then value is the setting itself. So we're going to go through and talk about what each of these do and how they work. Running mode is exactly that, the operation of the motor. So you got forward brake, forward reverse brake, and forward reverse. It's like turn the reverse off, normal basher mode, rock crawl mode. So this is in rock crawl mode. Battery mode, type, I guess, is LiPo or nickel metal hydride. We have LiPo in here, so I have it set to LiPo. If you run nickel metal hydrides, that's what that mode is for. Setting number 3 is the cutoff voltage. So this one's maybe a little confusing because there's a disabled, so you can turn off the cutoff voltage, which is same thing nickel metal hydride does. And then there's auto low, auto medium, and auto high. And that's so that the speed control will detect the 2-cell or 3-cell automatically and then figure out low, medium, or high voltage cutoff. And it comes down to the voltage per cell. So low is like 3.1 to probably 3.3 depending. Medium is like 3.4, probably 3.5, and high is real safe, 3.6 or 7 type of thing. And the reason there's no numbers there is because the actual voltage of the battery really depends on a couple things. So it can be kind of misleading if you set it to a number and when you check your battery it's not that same number. It'll kind of never be that same number because of the way it all works. This is set to auto medium, which is, you know, safe range for the most part. Not max runtime and not super safe either. Setting number 4 is your initial start force, and I always put this to setting number 1. Initial start force is how gradually the speed control tries to start the motor, like the startup, if you will. So real low is real smooth. If you're set up, because it's kind of different for the different types of motors that you're going to use and some of the other settings. Let's say it's too soft, like you move the throttle and the motor doesn't respond enough, you can help that by turning this initial start force up. And I like it real smooth on the bottom. 5 is your max forward force. That's pretty straightforward. If you need to slow the speed control down and you don't have that adjustability on your radio, let's say you let the kids drive it or something, you can change the max forward force with this, or how fast it is in forward. Obviously, I got that set on number 4 for full speed. And then we'll jump over to the back here. Item number 6 is reverse. That's the same thing as forward, reverse max force. You change that. And then where it gets a little confusing here, max brake force number 7 and initial brake force number 8. These guys are only kind of in operation when you're using the non-rock crawling mode. So for rock crawler, it doesn't matter. But for brake force and initial brake force, max brake force is the push brake. So how strong the push brake is, you can turn that up or down so that you have weaker maximum brakes. And then initial brake force is much like the initial drive force. It allows you to change how hard the initial hit of the brakes is. Setting number 9, because we're in rock crawl mode, those 7 and 8 don't really do anything. Number 9 is your drag brake force, and it goes from 0 to 5 to 10, and then jumps up to 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. And reason being is it's primarily for rock crawling, and then for most other brush motor situations, you don't really want a ton of drag brake. You want a little bit or a lot for the most part. So there's a gradient in the front that's kind of fine for normal usage, and then the rest of it's kind of rock crawl intended. Number 10 is one that I run the drag brake all the way up in my rock crawler for brush motor stuff. Number 10 is our drag brake rate, and this is like the drag brake increase rate, if you will. How hard you're smashing the pedal is one way to think about it. And I like to run this drag brake rate level down at number 1 instead of number 4. So I'm going to change value, hit OK to save that. And that way, now my drag brake rate is at level 1, which is the slowest. So if I'm going along at high speed and I let off the brake, it applies it real slowly so I don't get that real herky-jerky move. And then when you're driving up and down hills, it allows you to let the vehicle kind of move a little bit under control, because as you let off the brake, it's applying it slow enough that you still get some movement. Number 11 is neutral range, and that's your deadband between your throttle and your reverse. So if you got a real twitchy throttle, you notice that it jitters one way or the other, neutral range can be increased to help that. A start mode or the punch, let's go to number 12. I always turn this all the way up to number 9, and reason being is it's the most linear. When you go full throttle, the punch or the start mode is how aggressive or how one-to-one that speed control is going to try to respond. So if you run it lower, when you punch the trigger, it'll increase it real slowly. If you run it at number 9 all the way, when you punch the trigger, it's going to punch the throttle also. So number 13 is our PWM frequency. Now this is a fun one because this really changes how the speed control feels. And it'll vary for the different types of motors, different turns, different poles, and higher frequencies are higher duty cycle for the speed control, and what that means is it's smoother. The lower frequencies are going to be more aggressive, and where that happens is the throttle response, like mid-range throttle. So if you want the throttle to be kind of mushy and softer as you move your throttle inputs, higher frequencies are going to be good. If you want it to be real linear one-to-one, lower frequencies are going to be good. These are the ones that the frequencies change the tones sometimes of the motors too. That's what that tone is coming from, these actual frequencies. So 13, I usually leave these at defaults unless I get real finicky about it. 8K is, kind of in the middle-ish of the range that it has, so nothing too aggressive. And setting number 14 is the BEC voltage. I leave that on 1 standard RTR servo in this rig. So that just changes the BEC voltage output. And it'll change this output to this port too. So if you're running fans or lights, it matches there. And that that runs in parallel with your BEC. So whatever you plug into this port is going to run off the speed control's internal switching BEC. And then number 15 is freewheeling. Now this is a fun one. This has all to do with how the vehicle wants to drive downhill when you're moving throttle, when it's going down the hill and you're driving in that direction. So turning this on and off is going to be something, it's going to be very dependent on what you like. Some people like this on, some people like this off, and it does depend a little bit on the motor. So I currently have this enabled, and we're going to take it out on the rocks, run it, switch it back and forth, and see which one I like, because this is, you know, I can plug this in on trail real easy. That's basically how all the settings work. The one thing to just keep in mind is when you get to a setting and you want to change it, you do have to hit enter or OK, this right side button, to make it stick. But that's all there is to it. When you're done, you turn it off, everything's in there, and you're good to go. Another thing to note is that if you have a different LED programming card, they work together. The sticker's not going to be the same. But the instruction manual shows these same settings for the box that comes with the WP1080. So if you got a WP1080 somehow in a truck or whatever, and you don't have this box, but you have this box, it doesn't matter which box it is. So long as it's the HOBBYWING LED programming card, it'll show the settings that are inside the speed control, and you can always use the chart that's in the manual or look it up on the website. So pro tip. And one more thing we often get asked, the BEC in here, people want to know if they can run whatever the case may be, if they need an external BEC. And for most of the applications that we've run this in, single heavy duty steering servos, this is not a good example of that, but other vehicles, and multiple servos for shifters and stuff like that, it's been fine. It's a switching BEC, it's very heavy duty, and it's tied into the heatsink here, so it does work very well. So there are situations where people are running crazy servos, or they want to run them however they see fit, and they just want to run an external BEC, and just make sure that you know what you're doing and you're familiar with that, because we get a lot of people that overlook that, wiring it all up, and it's no good. I added a zip tie for the power wires on the motor wires, and I also made the antenna longer, because the higher your antenna is, the farther underwater you can get, or farther down range. But just a quick recap on the install. All the wires fit real nicely. The thing I had to do was set the throttle to normal before I did the calibration, and the motor is wired backwards. So the yellow wire is the positive speed control wire, is onto the negative tab of the motor. And that's to make the wheels turn the right direction without reversing the throttle or using reverse as you're forward, like calibrating backwards or something weird like that. So. Well, I'm very excited to get this thing out on trail and get it dirty, really. I mean, nothing's better than scratch up a fresh body. Well, there it is, final configuration. I folded the body edges in just a little bit, obviously not very evenly either, to get them to stick inside of the side guards, because when you're bashing up on rocks, that helps for sliding along. That's what they are, sliders. And like I said before, this is trimmed just at the bottom of the valence there, so that the bumper, now that it's scooted back, fits in there. But it's a sharp looking rig. I'm a little biased because I'm a big kind of fanboy of Associated, so to speak, but it is a nice looking scaler. I gotta get the front end a little stiffer. With the battery in there, it sits kind of low, but if I could get the rear end to get right about there, that's probably perfect. Cool rig. See it out at Second Sunday. If you bump into me on trail and you want to try out a WP1080, I got a rig for you to try it in now. It'll have 2 cells and 3 cells, because I drove it around on a 2 cell. It's not fast enough.